The thing you'll see a lot, and a lot of people will talk about, is many people wish they had treated their hearing loss earlier. Like once they do treat their hearing loss, there's an immediate sense of, oh wow, this is actually changing quite a bit about how I'm interacting with the world. I've certainly had that experience. I don't regret my path, but I do think I now feel a greater sense of confidence in specific situations.
Blake Cadwell is the CEO and co-founder of Soundly.com, a platform dedicated to empowering individuals on their hearing journey. And Blake's passion for improving hearing care is deeply personal as he has lived with hearing loss himself. Through Soundly, he's built a platform that helps people navigate the often overwhelming world of hearing aids. Blake's team combines e-commerce with expert care, making the over-the-counter hearing aids and more prescription-level hearing aids accessible for those looking to get some help with speech understanding and hearing their loved ones. He joins us today to discuss the relationship between hearing, different options for treating hearing loss, and tinnitus, as well as Soundly's mission, their new over-the-counter offerings, and the evolving landscape of hearing devices. Please join me in welcoming my friend Blake Cadwell to the Treble Health podcast. Blake, can you first share a bit about your personal background and your experience with hearing loss?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, my relationship to hearing loss is very personal. My mom, brother, and I all wear hearing aids, and for me, I really became aware of my hearing loss when I was in middle school. My mom was diagnosed with hereditary hearing loss at that time. She was in her 40s, and she essentially came home, and a lot of things made sense all of a sudden. My brother and I had not been diagnosed until that point, and she gave me a choice. She said, "Do you want to get hearing aids or do you not want to get hearing aids?" And as a middle schooler, of course, everyone knows the answer that I gave, which was no. So I did not want to get hearing aids, and I progressed all the way through my 20s, first 10 years of my career, without having hearing aids, and got by in a bunch of different ways. And a lot of viewers may recognize some of the strategies. Definitely an adept lip reader. I learned that by talking louder, other people would also talk louder. I did that in work contexts all the time. And then the people around me would sort of play translator. My wife would play translator for me and tell me if I missed something. I had colleagues do that for me. I was pretty open about my hearing loss, but just didn't feel ready to treat it until 2020 actually rolled around and everyone put masks on, and that was sort of the big moment where I suddenly was not able to operate in the world. And that was the moment that I decided to get hearing aids for the first time, and sort of kicked off everything that's happened since.
And that was around the time that we met and got connected, actually, because I saw that there was someone who was writing first-person blog articles for a website called Soundly, and it was clear that the style of writing you had was very experiential, meaning you were experiencing difficulties with hearing and you were sharing people what you've learned along the way. You went on to actually try different hearing aids and report about it, how it affected your ears, which we'll get into. For those listening who have a main problem with tinnitus, ringing in the ears, we must address that tinnitus and hearing loss are so often combined, and that treating tinnitus often includes the same treatment as those who get treatment for hearing loss, and most often those are hearing aids. There was a 2023 studies by Sanders and their group that found a significant reduction in tinnitus for 47% of individuals for both new and experienced hearing aid users, who included some tinnitus features, primarily sound therapy, that went along with the speech clarity mode inside of the hearing aids. So this is relevant to anyone here who's looking for solutions, whether it be tinnitus or hearing loss. Blake, do you have any experience with tinnitus? How does it affect you personally, and how does it affect those who come to Soundly looking for some help?
Yeah, about 50% of folks who take our surveys at soundly.com have tinnitus of some kind. And exactly as you've said, they're typically looking to, usually treat both. They're looking to have amplification improve their communication with loved ones, or improve their confidence at appointments or in work settings. But they're also looking for relief from tinnitus. And my own experience with tinnitus, it's not a really big part of my life. I certainly experience it when I have no hearing aids in and I'm in a quiet room. Often when I am stressed or when I haven't had enough sleep, my primary experience is hearing loss. But many of the folks that we interact with on a daily basis are dealing with tinnitus and trying to figure out how to get some relief.
Got it. So let's bring us back to that phase where you decided, hey, I want to treat my hearing loss. How did you approach those first steps and what did you find?
Yeah, so I think it's anyone who's gone through the process of trying to find hearing aids for the first time, there's sort of this confounding moment where you are, I know I had the feeling several times of like, how is it this hard? It can't actually be this hard to figure it all out. And some of the experiences that I had, and I know many people resonate, is you come online and you see products that are a couple $100 all the way up to products that are premium level with professional support, multiple thousands of dollars. And then you see products with all different feature sets in different shapes and sizes. And now, 4 or 5 years later, a lot of these things make sense to me. I can decipher the differences. I've tested most of these products, but at the time, this was all completely a new language to me. And I had a hard time initially figuring out sort of which way was up. I remember spending probably at least 10 or 12 hours just with various Google researches, Google searches, and just trying to piece it all together. And really that became sort of the inspiration for me to do what you mentioned, which is to start writing about it. Like after I was a few steps in, I realized I think this would actually help a lot of people if I just started blogging about what I'm doing and what I'm trying. And that was really the beginning of Soundly.
If you're wondering what's the best hearing aid for tinnitus, I would say hands down it's the Widex devices. They have the sound therapy called Sound Relax, which has different custom sounds which mix in with tinnitus and make it easier to be in quiet places. So with hearing aids like the ones that I'm holding right here, they can provide a ton of relief for tinnitus in the moment, as well as be used during your treatment process. At Treble Health, in our Tinnitus 180 program, we make sure that our patients get the best hearing aids for tinnitus, and most often we're using the Widex devices. So if you'd like to schedule a free consultation with a specialist from Treble Health to learn more about which hearing aid or sound therapy device is best for you, you can click the link on the screen right here and we'll take you to a page that you can schedule your Zoom consultation. Hope to see you there. Thanks so much. Now back to the podcast. So, what's your background and how has that been a part of this journey for you?
My background prior to starting Soundly, which really I formally started in 2022, was in advertising and communications and some technology. And so it became a very natural, maybe even cathartic part of my process to externalize and communicate my journey. And, I think especially once I started getting feedback and comments from folks and seeing that this was helping people, that became, it really started to make my experience feel less lonely and also more meaningful in some ways.
So, what were the main problems you had hearing?
So my hearing loss is a little bit different than the traditional configuration, which, as you know, is a slope. So the most of the people that we interact with at soundly.com are dealing with hearing loss that is a little bit better in the low frequencies and trails off and gets a little bit worse in the high frequencies. Mine is a hereditary loss, which is a cookie bite, so it goes down in the middle and back up at the top. And so what I was missing primarily was just speech sounds, which obviously is a big problem.
What'd you end up finding here, trying all these products?
Yeah, so at this point, now in 2024, I've tried, I think, 60 or 70 different pairs of hearing aids.
That's
From
possibly the most of any human that's ever lived.
It's a lot. So my range has really grown over time. Initially, I started with a pair of Resound One hearing aids, which was sort of a flagship product at the time. That worked out really well for me and sort of got me on track. And then over time, I've found lots of other products that also work really well for me if they're set up properly, including, this is all happening in 2021, 2022. In late 2022, the FDA obviously opened up the possibility for over-the-counter products, and so I've worn a lot of over-the-counter products since then, and I've found some really amazing over-the-counter products as well, which I know we'll talk about.
What does over-the-counter hearing aid really mean?
Yeah, it's a great question and an evolving answer. I think the answer is different now than it was even certainly 12 months ago, maybe even 6 months ago, as the landscape continues to evolve. There are a few different thoughts here. So The first thing we recommend to folks who are trying to, let's say they're at a starting point. They've never had a pair of hearing aids, or they're looking for a new one, or maybe they tried something and then it wasn't quite right and they walked away for a while. The first thing we recommend to folks is to think about the care method that is going to be the best fit for them. Instead of thinking technology first, we really recommend folks think care model first. So if you're the kind of person, which I would say I am, who wants to tinker with your own devices, you want a little bit more control, you like the idea of being able to do a lot of things on an app without having to ask anyone else to help you, over-the-counter hearing aids can be a good option. Now, of course, there are restrictions. Over-the-counter hearing aids are only good for folks with mild or moderate hearing loss. That's really important because there are actual caps on the output of sound with all over-the-counter hearing aids. But if you're that kind of person, over-the-counter can be a good option for you. If you're the kind of person who really doesn't want to go through that process, you would prefer to work with someone who is taking you through a process, who's looking at your results and making specific recommendations, who's tweaking things when you give them feedback about your soundscape, then either a telehealth option or an in-clinic option is almost certainly going to be best for you. And then you get down to the question, so your question, which is, what is an over-the-counter hearing aid? And the simple answer from my perspective, having tried most of them, all the way from $100 to $1,000, $2,500, there's quite a range even within OTC. The simple answer is almost everything is an over-the-counter hearing aid now. The way the FDA wrote the guidelines, over-the-counter is quite a broad category. But within over-the-counter, there are some subcategories, and there are some brands that we think in particular really excel. So when we initially launched our direct sales through Soundly.com, so you can now purchase hearing aids on Soundly.com, and we do a consultation up front if you want it, and then we also will do a guided setup with you. So if you want to do it yourself, but you also want some support, we're kind of trying to do both.
I want to address that. Essentially, if I zoom out, I see over-the-counter devices, whether online or from a pharmacy or from some store. Essentially, they're self-fit, meaning you don't need an audiologist or a hearing instrument specialist, a professional, to do it for you. You also don't need an in-person hearing test. Now, the idea here is that this would increase the accessibility to hearing care and the affordability, so that it's not just the more expensive options, but there's more entry-level options, as well as just different price points for people. So I think that's overall a really good thing, but the major problem I see is that it increases the risk that it doesn't go well. For example, when an audiologist is working one-on-one with the patient, they can adjust the hearing aids and provide a treatment that has a higher effectiveness than these self-fitting options. But there is a cost difference. So now we get into well, what's the best value? There's a lot of variables here, is what I'm highlighting. I'm curious how you guys at Soundly look at that, how you also select the products that you recommend, because at this stage you're not manufacturing the devices, so you're partnering with companies that manufacture the hearing aids. You're essentially testing them. I'm curious how you choose the products that you recommend and what you see in terms of the quality.
Yeah. So the starting point at this stage for us is fairly easy in terms of product selection. For all of the products that we sell directly, I've worn the product for several months. So just personally, I'm looking at it and saying, how was that experience? Did it work well for me? We also do testing in our lab, which I'm sitting in here now. And we look at, we have a ProFit, which essentially will measure the output of a hearing aid against a prescriptive target. And so one interesting test we did was with our bestseller, which is actually the Sennheiser All Day Clear. That's the product that people have the best outcomes with. At Soundly, that's an over-the-counter product that you fit using a smartphone app. And it's made by Sonova, which is the maker of Phonak hearing aids. So we took a programmed pair of Phonak hearing aids and a self-fit pair of Sennheiser hearing aids, which I had just used the app using their test. We put them in a ProFit box, and the lines, for anyone who can kind of visualize what I'm talking about, the lines were basically identical. You really couldn't tell them apart. And so if you know what you're doing and you're comfortable working with a smartphone app, what we're seeing is people can get prescriptive targets. They need to pick the right product, and I think that's the key piece. Sennheiser's made by Sonova, which comes off the same factory line as their Unitron and Phonak products. If you purchase something that is $100, or maybe something you're seeing on Amazon, you're not guaranteed that level of sophistication in the base technology.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that people who do their research and can find some great products at the lower price points could potentially get some help and not be sacrificing that much in terms of the sound quality or their ability to hear soft voices or in background noise. Just because the sound output in terms of volume is similar doesn't necessarily mean the listener's experience of the sound quality, the intelligibility, the how well they can understand speech. I'm really glad that you're listening to these in person. One thing that I wanted to bring up is the importance of tinnitus features inside of products. I wouldn't want someone who has a primary issue with tinnitus to end up buying a hearing aid that doesn't actually have sound therapy features, for example. So, what's your approach with tinnitus products? And hopefully, Treble Health can be considered as a, as a partner here with you.
I absolutely think it should be, and it's a good point. So this is definitely an area where over-the-counter devices are not offering the same feature sets. What we don't see in over-the-counter devices today is as robust of tinnitus therapy. In fact, most over-the-counter devices do not have tinnitus therapy at all. It's rare to see one that does. None of our top sellers do. So, what those hearing aids are doing for folks who have tinnitus is obviously increasing the sound of the outside world. That may create some natural therapy, but it's not going to create the therapy, that you all often work in. And, I think in general, when we are talking to someone who has tinnitus, we're trying to understand from them often whether that's the primary thing that they're working on, or if they're primarily working on their ability to hear and communicate. Many times those two are one and the same, but for many folks, there's one that's kind of leading the other. And I think for folks that are looking for primarily relief from significant tinnitus, we certainly do recommend Treble Health. We think Treble Health is doing amazing work. I was mentioning to our team that in preparation for this conversation, I looked at their Trustpilot, and the reviews are phenomenal. And it's amazing to see how many successful conversations and interactions you all are having that are really providing great results. And you can see that that's a holistic approach. It's not just a device that's amplifying sound. I think it's quite a bit different depending on what that primary goal is. So when we're talking to folks at Soundly, that's one of the first things we're trying to figure out is, are you mainly targeting tinnitus, or are you mainly targeting your hearing loss? And we really focus on the hearing loss side.
Makes a lot of sense to me. And for someone who has a primary problem with tinnitus who might be listening, I think Soundly fits into the stage of someone has an issue with tinnitus. They try to find the root cause, get it diagnosed, understand their options to make it better or reduce it. And then they may realize that for their specific case, hopefully with professional guidance to make sure this is accurate, they may realize that hearing aids could be an important part of their treatment. Whether or not they have a hearing loss, hearing aids can be programmed for tinnitus. That's what we work with our patients and the hearing devices that we use. So at that stage, then they're thinking, okay, what are the best hearing aid options for me that have tinnitus features? There's not that many available in the over-the-counter model, and in my understanding, part of that is because the Over-the-Counter Hearing Aid Act, it's for hearing loss. It's not for tinnitus, and there are different medical conditions that it's worth mentioning. Tinnitus can more likely be related to complex medical conditions, whereas hearing loss is more likely to be straightforward. It's an age-related hearing loss or a noise-induced, noise-related hearing loss. So for that reason, we want everyone with tinnitus to get the proper medical evaluation. But if they get to the point where they're considering hearing aids, then it does make sense to bring in these comparisons, talking to professionals, reaching out to you guys, working with our team, having a consultation with a doctor from Treble Health. So that all makes sense. I want to jump into the experience of what are the common decisions other than what kind of care model do I want, in person or telehealth, for example, um, and then the style of the hearing aid. You know, do I want a nearly invisible one? Do I want one that connects to Bluetooth really well? I'm curious, what are the important decision points that essentially create forks in the road that ultimately lead someone to hearing voices more clearly, hearing better in background noise, getting the right solution for their hearing?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have a guide at soundly.com. If you go up to the main nav, there's a beginner's guide, which is about, we structured it as sort of a 60-minute research session. The steps that we really emphasize for folks are, first, if you're coming in fresh and you have absolutely no idea where you stand, the first important step is to take a hearing test. You can do that locally. There are good online tests. We have a really simple test on our site, which gives you an audiogram. So you can see whether you have a slope, you have a cookie bite like me, you have a reverse slope, you have asymmetric, which means you've got two different hearing loss levels on each of your ears. It's good to have that information first. So that's where we typically recommend folks start. So if you don't understand yourself, it's hard to know where to go from there. From that point, we recommend thinking about care model, as I mentioned earlier. If you have severe hearing loss, that's going to really dictate the care model that you go with. You'll need to work with a doctor or a professional to program your hearing aids. If you have mild or moderate, you have some decisions to make along the way between over-the-counter or prescription. And then once you've decided on your care model, the next place we typically look for folks to sort of make decisions is actually around style. Now, there are some debate around where style should fit in this flow chart. In my opinion, most folks come into their research with a pretty strong perspective on hearing aid style that they're interested in. A lot of people want to start with an in-ear device. We typically will recommend folks at least consider behind-the-ear devices. I wear a behind-the-ear device. They can have better sound quality depending on the technology. They often are just as discreet. If you kind of look at the side of my ear, it's very discreet. You're hardly going to know that I'm wearing it. And often they are more comfortable and less occlusive, meaning they have a more natural and open sound.
What we do know with tinnitus is the model that you have is the best hearing aid model, the thin piece up and behind the ear with the wire going alongside the skin, and then that rubber tip inside of the ear canal. It allows for ambient sound to still be heard in most cases. It doesn't plug up the ear. So for someone who has tinnitus, putting in earplugs makes the tinnitus louder, and that's the exact opposite experience of what we want. So that all makes sense. So hearing devices can be used, of course, for hearing loss, but they also can be used for tinnitus treatment. Should OTC hearing aids be used for tinnitus? In most cases, no. If someone has a mild case of tinnitus where their primary issue is with hearing loss, then an OTC hearing aid could be a good fit potentially. If someone who's listening says, "Oh gosh, I'm not sure exactly what's going on," that's the right point to, in my opinion, get a hearing test with an audiologist or speak with a professional via telehealth who can guide you towards the right fit and ultimately, hearing better and hearing more clearly. What kind of message do you have for those listening with hearing loss or tinnitus?
Yeah, for folks with hearing loss, I kind of think about my own mindset on this. I think when I first approached the category, it seemed like such a mess. I was having such a hard time orienting myself, trying to figure out what was my approach, what was my way in. I think for many folks, using resources like soundly.com or Treble's resources, it is possible to get to the right product and the right solution that can make a really big difference in your life, and to do that kind of quickly and somewhat painlessly. And there's a whole range of possibilities from a price point perspective, from an independent or guided perspective. You actually have quite a few options, which I don't think I quite understood as I was beginning. It felt like there were too many options, but also no options. And, I think what I've seen is that there are actually some clear paths that almost anybody can take. The thing you'll see a lot, and a lot of people will talk about, is many people wish they had treated their hearing loss earlier. It's like once they do treat their hearing loss, there's an immediate sense of, oh wow, this is actually changing quite a bit about how I'm interacting with the world. I've certainly had that experience. I don't regret my path, but I do think I now feel a greater sense of confidence in specific situations. So, I think it's worth it for most folks to give it a shot, and you can start in such easy and interesting ways now, even compared to where we were 5 years ago.
Guys, soundly.com, check it out. We're here with Blake Cadwell. Blake, always a pleasure. Hope to speak with you again pretty soon.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody.
Now that you've been educated on which hearing aids are best for tinnitus, I'd encourage you to schedule a free consultation with a member of Treble Health. Click the link on the screen right now, and you'll book a telehealth complimentary session, which will allow you to ask specific questions and get some guidance on which hearing aid products are right for you. Click the link on the screen right now to book your free call today. Thanks so much. This is Dr. Ben Thompson with Treble Health.